Dia Dich Achara, hello my friend. Thank you for joining me today to read chapter 9 of the Changeling's Call, which is a new song. This one is only about 8 pages, so a little bit longer. But if the sound is a little echoey in here, let me know and I won't use this room again. It's a little bit windy outside, so I brought it inside today. All right, let's get back into the story. Though Orla expected to see the dark fairy in her dreams again, she awoke with no memory of dreaming at all. Danny had curled up around her and was still asleep. Sleeping, he looked rather sweet and young. She noticed a tattoo on his arm, but couldn't quite make out what it was meant to be. Finn had disappeared again. In the morning light, the small clearing where they had made camp was lush and beautiful. Blackberry vines climbed over bushes and nearby trees, with white flowers and bright red berries. Delicate white and yellow lilies bloomed beside a small trickling brook, and she watched a butterfly float leisurely from the blackberries to the water. With a feeling of deep gratitude for this beautiful land, she knelt by the brook and dipped her hands into the icy water to bathe her face. A small movement caught her eye, and she spied Finn shimmying his way down a nearby tree with a satisfied look on his face. When he reached the ground, he gathered up some nuts and acorns that he had apparently thrown out of the tree. "Good morning, Finn. Want some help?" He was filling his coat, but was already running out of room. She quickly helped him gather up the rest, and they sorted them into a pile of acorns and a pile of nuts. She started a small fire for boiling the acorns. She had brought a tin cup that the cheese had been stored in that would serve the purpose well. Danny awoke and began helping crack the nuts, while Finn foraged some of the nearby blackberries, using his trick of ripening the hard-red fruits into plump blackberries. As they prepared their meager but tasty breakfast, Danny told them his story in more detail. "I don't know if they were Vikings or some other type of raider band, but they weren't English. I don't think they were even outnumbered us, but they took us by surprise and were vicious fighters. Our village was small, only a dozen families, and many of us old men and women. I would have fought to my last breath, but my brother and I were knocked out before we could do much. When we awoke, we were bound, along with every other young man from our village and a few of the women. The men were angry, but the women were furious because some of them had seen children slain during the attack. To kill the adults makes sense if you're after looting a place, but to kill children, I'm not sure what would possess a person to do that. Many of them wanted to get revenge on the raiders, break free, and kill them all. There were about 20 of us, counting the women, and 20 of them, so I didn't fancy our chances since they were armed." Orla used some strips of bark to give them each a portion of acorn mash, nuts, and berries, though the story was taking the edge off her appetite. Then on the second night, we were able to steal a small knife one of them left out carelessly after cooking. Once they fell asleep, we cut our bonds. I managed to talk the others out of seeking revenge, since I knew they would beat or kill us all as soon as one of them sounded the alarm. Unfortunately, one of them did wake, and I was separated from my brother as we all tried to flee. I don't know how many of us escaped. That was 2 days ago, and I've had no sign of anyone." Finn looked unimpressed. 2 days is not enough distance to mean you've shaken them for good. I doubt your little village was flush with riches, which means they attacked you with the purpose of acquiring slaves, so it's not likely they'll be packing off and sailing home without what they came for. Orla tried to imagine what it would be like to live as a slave. She wondered why people were so compelled by greed. Sure, having a good life took hard work sometimes, but the land was generous, and a person could easily provide for themselves by their own labor, without forcing another person to work for them for free. For some reason, she thought of Neil accosting her, even though he was a handsome enough man, could have easily found someone who actually wanted him. Danny shrugged. "I can only keep moving and hope they've gone in another direction. Anyway, enough about me. Orla, why are you looking to join the fairies? Did someone break your heart?" Orla scowled. "Why do you assume it's something to do with a man? Why can't a woman just decide to abandon society?" Finn grinned. "Oh, I think it's definitely something to do with a man, but I don't think he broke her heart. She's never been in love before, I can tell." "How can you possibly know that?" Orla asked, exasperated. Finn was clearly pleased by how easily he'd gotten under her skin. "I have good ears, my dear. I can hear it in your voice. You've a voice like a baby, innocent and free of romantic heartbreak." Orla finished her breakfast and got up. "I think you're just making it up," she grumbled, "but I actually did have some trouble with my new stepbrother before I left. It was the last straw for me, and I couldn't keep living there." Danny looked at her with empathy in his eyes. "I'm sorry that happened. I would have roughed him up for you if I was there. We can make a detour and go to your town if you like." Orla couldn't help but laugh. Thank you, but I'd rather go to the ocean or anywhere else than see his face again. So they continued on their way, with Finn promising that if they kept a good pace, it would be just another day and a half's walk to the shore. However, his merry singing and joking dwindled once again just 2 hours after they'd set out, and Orla knew without his saying that something or someone was approaching. After a while, he turned to them. I'm afraid your enemies may have tracked you after all, Danny boy. A large group of humans is headed our way. I will hide, and Orla, you should do the same. With that, he walked to a nearby tree and began to climb. With no better plan coming to mind, Orla looked around and found a suitable tree with enough foliage to hide herself in. Danny remained on the ground, looking resigned. Still lacking a proper weapon, he began looking for a fallen branch or stone to throw. Wait, Orla said panically, what are we doing? Danny should hide too. No, he argued, they'll keep looking if I don't show myself. We don't know that. Come on, Danny, she begged. There's no way you can fight them all. Hush, they can't know you're here, Finn chided from his tree. Orla reluctantly gave in and shifted to a more sustainable position on the tree branch. Were they going to just sit there and watch him be killed? Less than a minute later, they could hear the commotion of a large party approaching without any concern for making noise. Orla thought she could smell them as well, and then she saw how foul with dirt and bloodstains they were. Danny stood resolute with a large piece of fallen wood, but he was outnumbered 11-1. The band must have split to cover more ground, and she could see the raiders were all carrying blades, or at least clubs. Desperate to do anything to delay the inevitable, she took a deep breath and began to sing. She sang the way Finn had instructed her to, without words, and she ignored her feelings of fear and panic so that her song was one of peace and tenderness. At first the men looked surprised, then they laughed, but they were not advancing on Danny. As she continued, she watched their faces slacken and their eyes lose focus. One by one, they dropped their weapons and slowly sank to their knees before laying down completely. Even Danny has dropped his makeshift club and was getting to his knees. Finn appeared beside her as she paused in her song. Don't stop, girl. He dropped lightly from the tree and reached Danny, then whispered something in his ear that caused him to rouse and rise from the ground. Orla quickly made her way to the ground and joined them, all while singing. Now we must leave no trace and hasten away from here, commanded Finn. Wait, cried Danny, we could use a weapon. And he deftly loosened a 12-inch knife from the belt of one of the sleeping men. With the weapon in hand, he paused. The look on his face was easy to read. It would be only too easy now to exact his revenge, but Finn laid a hand on his hand. There's no honor in killing a man in his sleep, Danny boy. Let us be gone. So they carefully made their way west at a brisk pace, moving as fast as they could, while still making sure not to leave any sign of their passing. Finn wouldn't let Orla stop singing for a good 15 minutes, so she was quite out of breath by the time he finally signaled her to stop. So now, said Danny, I've not only befriended a leprechaun, but I've also seen a mob of murderous men taken down by a song. How many more of the things I've heard of in fairy tales are really true? Ha, laughed Finn, quite a bit, let me tell you. He stopped as he noticed Orla grimacing with pain. What's happened, princess? Now that the danger and panic had subsided, she felt a throbbing pain in her knee and remembered hurting it as she came so quickly down from her hiding place in the tree. She raised her skirt and immediately felt lightheaded when she saw the stream of blood running from her upper thigh to just above her ankle. Don't worry, it's not a deep wound, assured Danny. Let me help. Finn went off in search of more water, and Orla sat down on a clump of grass that unfortunately proved to be damp. Her mind was still reeling from what she'd just done with her voice. Danny carefully tore a long, thin strip of cloth from the bottom of her skirt. Sorry, I'd take it from my vest, but your clothes are far cleaner. He moved her skirt up to halfway up her thigh, and she silently willed her blood to stop from rushing to her face. His hands were surprisingly warm and gentle as he deftly wiped away the blood and began wrapping the wound with cloth. For a man on the run, she was surprised that he smelled as good as he did, mostly of earth and leather, with a hint of the musky scent she associated with men. You know, I'd like to become a healer. I just need to find someone to take me as their apprentice. As he leaned closer to secure the bandage with a knot, she could feel his breath on her thigh, and a shiver ran up her spine. She quickly grabbed her skirt and pushed it back into place, barely giving him time to move his hands away. As they stood up, Finn reappeared, with his water sack replenished, and they resumed walking. As I was saying, there's quite a lot that's true in the human stories I've heard, said Finn, with the air of someone settling in to tell a long story. But they don't know everything. First thing you need to know is, it's not as simple as good fairies and bad fairies. We have those of the Unseelie court, who feel that their responsibility is to keep humans from becoming too powerful and somehow taking over our realm. Here you have your elves, fairies, goblins, brownies, trolls, sirens, selkies, and gnomes. They either ignore humans or they spend their time finding ways to thwart and hinder them. The most innocent of them play tricks, hide your things, make you trip and fall. The more sinister ones create illnesses. Of course, we can't be harmed by any kind of illness. There are very few ways to kill a fairy, and they can't die of sickness or old age. Then there's the Seelie Court, which is the official fairy court. These fairies may also play tricks on humans, but they won't hurt them, not really. These are also elves and fairies, as well as pixies, sprites, elementals, and dryads. And I suppose us leprechauns as well, though we are not recognized at court. But Finn, interjected Danny, how can you all really be immortal? Wouldn't you just keep having babies until you were totally overpopulated? Fair question, he replied, but I don't know that I would really say immortal, because we can die. If you pierce a fairy's heart with iron, they can die, and there are some spells strong enough to kill a fairy, though it is rare to come across one with the power to do such an awful crime. And though there is some variance from species to species, overall we do not reproduce nearly as much as you humans do. We reach maturity much later, and for example, a female elf only gets a chance to conceive once every 11 years. It is rare for a couple to have more than one child per century, and I have never heard of an elf giving birth to more than 4 children. If anything, our numbers are dwindling, not overwhelming us. Tell us about the court, asked Orla. What is the queen like? Finn sighed. I can't tell you an awful lot about court, seeing as I've only been there a few times myself. It's not like I've ever been granted an audience with the queen. They say she's very beautiful and incredibly powerful. However, her only son was killed many years ago, so she does not have an heir. Her sister's daughter may be next in line for the throne. Of course, this is not as much a concern for us as it is for humans, because our Queen Titania may reign for centuries more. Before long, the shadows began to lengthen, and it was time to make camp for the evening. Danny had managed to kill a grouse with a makeshift slingshot, and they passed a pleasant evening drinking fresh spring water, eating roasted fowl, wild onions, and magically ripened apples, and listening to Finn tell stories about the fair folk. Orla found herself laughing along with Danny at one of Finn's jokes, and realized that this was the happiest she had been since before her father got sick so long ago. She had found a new power today, and it made her feel less fearful. She already liked Finn a lot, and was starting to grow fond of Danny too. Tomorrow they would hopefully meet the Selkies, which was so wonderful it didn't seem real. Soon it was time to douse the fire and lay out their blankets and bedrolls. As she fell asleep, she thought about how Finn felt unwelcome at court, and wondered if she would be treated the same, or worse. Sorry, I shouldn't say Selkies, I should say fairies. There he was again. This time, his hair was unbound and flowed in black waves past his shoulders. He came toward her, and she was more excited than afraid. He looked curious and at the same time amused. Again, his voice came into her mind without his lips moving. Now will you dance with me? I heard your singing earlier. Very impressive, mysterious one. I don't even know your name, and you want me to dance with you? She answered him, also in her mind. She hoped he wasn't able to read her thoughts, because she was admiring his beautiful face and wondering how he achieved such a smooth shave. He stepped closer, and she had to remind herself to breathe as he held out his hand. Suddenly the night filled with that same sweet music as last time. She lifted her hand, and he took it, moving closer and lightly touching her waist with his other hand. They began to dance, and it was like no dance she'd had before. He was incredibly light and elegant in his movements, and she herself was a talented dancer, so together they seemed to be floating more than dancing. Then she realized they were floating, about half a foot off the ground, then higher until they were above the tree line, and all she could see was him and the stars. This is not your true form, but it still looks nice on you. I want to kiss you. No, you still haven't told me your name. He smiled wider. I will when I meet you. And suddenly it was daybreak. All right, so we got a little sneak peek at the first of the other fairies, besides Finn, I mean. And that's the end of chapter 9. Thank you so much for reading with me today, and I hope to see you back for chapter 10. Salam.